Good afternoon, Rumblers. This is Tate Brown here, holding it down for Tim Pool. The voice is it's rough. He's not quite RFK territory yet, but it's sounding pretty bad. I mean, you probably saw on his Twitter he had to go to the hospital this last weekend. So he's taking it easy this week. I think he came to the determination that it's going to be better to just rest like a few more days to get back to 100% rather than keep pushing it and risking, further inflaming it. Makes total sense, and it's all right because we'll hold it down in the meantime. Like I said, I'm here taking you into the afternoon here on the Rumble morning lineup. Steven Crowder ratings, we appreciate that from the Crowder team, keeping this lineup on the move. We're here. It's a nice overcast day, not quite rainy, just a nice little overcast. It's a nice mood. It's a really moody weather outside, here outside of our nation's capital. We got a lot of great news today. We have obviously you probably saw in the headline, the Trump-Smithsonian battle is still going. There was the executive order 6 days ago where Trump, demanded that the Smithsonian ceases with this anti-American crap that they've been pushing. You probably saw his Truth Social yesterday. He went in on him. He's not pulling any punches. We also have big news involving Trump. He is introspective. He's talking about heaven. Will he make it to heaven? Will he not? And it's created a really interesting discourse around that whole conversation. We're going to get into that, and we'll see what's going on there. Elon Musk looks like he's done with the America Party project. We'll have to get into that and see what the future of that looks like. And then also the admin is going to start screening migrants for anti-American views. It's about time that we did that. Makes total sense. And if we have time, we'll get to that. And also we have Elijah Schaefer joining us at the half-hour mark. So that's going to be exciting. Obviously, he's a legend, so it's going to be great having him on to chat. We'll break down everything, literally everything. We'll break it all down. But before we do that, we got to check out today's sponsors. We have Cast Brew Coffee. 1 second, let me frame this. See, we do things on the fly here. Boom. Look at that. Now we're framed. Now we're here. See, Tim would have done that so slick and so quick. We're still getting there. It's a slow process. But anyway, first up, we got Cast Brew Coffee. We love Cast Brew. My first few shows I filled in, people said I was low energy. They said I needed some Cast Brew myself. And, I agree. So I started drinking some Appalachian Nights pre-show, fire me up. And, I do feel a lot more energized. So anecdotally, it works very well for me. So I would recommend heading over to Cast Brew and trying all these different flavors. You never know which one will end up being your go-to. I mean, we got the Colombian blend, the Stand Your Grounds. We have Ian's Graphene Dream, which is a smash hit. We had the live events these last few weekends, and the Ian's Graphene Dream flew off the shelves. So, head on over to Cast Brew, grab you some coffee, and, while you got the browser open, you might as well head to Boonies, too, and grab you a skateboard. I mean, right? You might as well do a little double dip, as they say. We have some great boards over here at Boonies. We got the Declaration of Independence. We have the Uncancelable board, which, I mean, I've gone into the story many times. Super cool story. And in short, I'll say buying a board is like buying a ticket to a war with cancel culture. I don't know. I need to workshop that a little better, but it's fantastic. We have the Be Gay and Don't Be Gay boards. There's a lot going on there, a lot to unpack. The 28th Amendment board, if you like chickens, if you're pro-chicken, then I'd recommend picking them up. Even if you're anti-chicken, I don't know who is, but maybe take a look at that. The Chick-fil-A cows, I think, are anti-chicken. Anyway, I digress. Let's get into the news. And we got first from the New York Times, Trump says Smithsonian focuses too much on how bad slavery was. That's not a great characterization of what he said, but we'll read the New York Times. We'll see what they have to say first, and then we'll get into the Truth Post itself. From the New York Times, President Trump accused the Smithsonian Institute on Tuesday of focusing too much on, quote, how bad slavery was, and not enough on the brightness of America, as his administration conducts a wide-ranging review of the content in its museum exhibits. Quote, "The Smithsonian is out of control." So true. "Where everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, and how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been. Nothing about success, nothing about brightness, nothing about the future," Mr. Trump said in a social media post. "This country cannot be woke because woke is broke. We have the hottest country in the world." So true. "And we want people to talk about it, including in our museums." And that was from this post here, this Truth Social post. This was yesterday in the afternoon. I mean, it's so true. Trump just has a way with words, man. He's just a poet. And of course, the only thing they extrapolated from this big long post was this line right here, and chucked that in the headline. Anyway, Mr. Trump made the comments a week after the White House told the Smithsonian that its museums would be required to adjust any content that the administration finds problematic in tone, historical framing, and alignment with the American ideals within 120 days. Taken together, the administration's examination and Mr. Trump's post Tuesday were the latest example of Mr. Trump trying to impose his will on a cultural institution and minimize the experiences and history of black people in the United States. That is obviously the New York Times analysis of anti-American rhetoric. I guess they're saying this is the New York Times suggestion. They're suggesting that anti-American rhetoric is synonymous with the history of black people. That's kind of a racist conclusion to make, but that is what the New York Times are suggesting here. Here's a quote from Douglas Brinkley, a presidential historian that I've never heard of. "It's the epitome of dumbness to criticize the Smithsonian for dealing with the reality of slavery in America. It's what led to our Civil War and is a defining aspect of our national history. And the Smithsonian deals in a robust way with what slavery was, but it also deals with human rights and civil rights in equal abundance." Obviously, that was Mr. Brinkley, a presidential historian. Sounds nice, nonpartisan, neutral voice, obviously. The epitome of dumbness, maybe some editorializing there. I don't know. Anyway, since taking office, Mr. Trump has led an effort to purge diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, aka DEI, from the federal government and threatened to investigate companies and schools that adopt such policies. He has tried to reframe the country's past involving racism and discrimination by de-emphasizing that history, preferring to instead spotlight a sanitized, rosy depiction of America. So, I mean, just take a look here at Trump. This is not consistent. Trump here is saying nothing about success, nothing about brightness, nothing about the future. Because what's the point of examining American history if you're only going to put a spotlight on its worst traits, its worst moments, its lowest moments? I mean, the thing about Trump, the thing that makes him so compelling to Americans is you got to remember, like when he came down that escalator, right? The culture we were in was the culture of Obama, which was the culture of apologizing, the culture of making you feel bad for being American. I mean, infamously, he had an entire media tour where he went to all these different countries and just apologized for things we had done in the past. Like, I mean, he apologized to Japan for the atom bomb, which is crazy. And so yeah, the entire vibe of the Obama years was just embarrassment. It was like we were embarrassed to be American. You always had this. July 4th wasn't a celebration. It was supposed to be this day of introspection, right? It wasn't a day of joyous. I mean, we built the greatest country in the world. Shouldn't we celebrate this? This is a wonderful thing. No, actually, we need to think about, the every little thing that we've done that may have been wrong because, I guess the standard is perfection. Anyway, if the standard is perfection, America is probably the closest to it because this is the finest country, the most powerful country. Americans are fantastic people, and Trump recognizes this. And again, I love this. Nothing about success, nothing about brightness. Brightness is such a great word to use. That's a word that you wouldn't expect to be in the arsenal of a president. And seeing him deploy that is beautiful because that's what Americans need. I mean, we're in such a nihilistic time. We're in the time where the average person just feels like dirt and they're soul searching at all times. They're lying awake at night wondering what's going to happen when they die. we could use a little brightness. We could use a little optimism, and that's what Trump brings to the table. Obviously, let's get into the Smithsonian situation a bit more, maybe less on the abstracts. This was great from Charlie Kirk today. He was commenting on the Truth Social. Culture matters, history matters, museums matter. Real. There's a reason immigrants don't assimilate and why young kids hate their country. They're taught to disrespect this country. Americans have so much to be proud of. This is the greatest republic on the planet. The Smithsonian, the National Museum of our capital city, should reflect our national greatness. Absolutely. I made this point on IRL a few days. I've traveled to a few countries. And what I love doing when I'm visiting a new country is I like visiting their national museum. I like to see how the people of that country conceptualize themselves, and typically the government will reflect that in their national museum. Obviously, the West is a bit of a different story, but countries that have a bit of self-respect will do this. Like for example, I went to Qatar, which no disrespect to Qatar, but their history is not really that interesting. They're just a desert peninsula, and they were they didn't really have much going on. I mean, most Western maps didn't even know that they were there until like the 1800s. So it's not dripping with the richness of Qatar doesn't have a lot to work with. I guess I'll put it that way. I mean, they weren't even independent until like 1971. I think the British ruled over Qatar. So all this to say, it's not like they're working with much. Again, no disrespect to Qatar. I thought it was a lovely country. But their museum, the way they conceptualize themselves, I mean, you would have thought that they were, China or something. I mean, like, the place is huge. It's dripping with artifacts. Every exhibit was just like glazing, like someone from their history, talking about how like this boat that some guy, invented in, 1820s, like the greatest thing ever made. Like everywhere you turned, it was just the Qatar show. And they weren't necessarily minimizing any bad aspects of their history. They talk about it, but they were just like, I mean, this is our national museum. Like, this isn't the national like struggle session, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. And the same thing happened in Kenya. When I went to Kenya, their national museum, which surprisingly was actually in really good shape considering the state of the country. Again, it was a healthy self-conception. They didn't hate themselves, which is, coming as a Westerner is so rare because the United States and then by extension, the UK, France, Germany, the Netherlands, all of these national museums in the West are just like self-deprecating. It's like they hate themselves. And it's basically just, thousands of square feet of apologizing. That's all that's really going on in these national museums in the West. And you go to the National Museum in Kenya, and it's just like, this is great. Check out this art. Check out this little trinket over here. Like we got elephants in this country. It's a great place. You'll love it here. It's just a healthy self-conception. It's like it doesn't feel like suicidal, like when you're going through the Smithsonian. Like if the United States was a person, the Smithsonian would be like its suicide letter. I mean, seriously, I hate to be grim, but that's exactly what's going on. Is it's just like profusely apologizing for everything. Like, just, I invented slavery, basically. Like, everything is just sad and depressing. There's no brightness, like Trump said. Zambia. I mean, I went to the National Museum in Zambia. That place was falling apart. And they just threw, like, a jacket up on a wall, and they're like, oh, our president, 30 years ago wore this and gave a great speech with it. I mean, Zambia has a lot going on, a lot of sadness there. It's not, it's not the most pleasant country in the world, but they figured, little kids from schools and whatever foreign tourists we do get are going to visit the National Museum. So why do we want to emphasize the worst qualities of our country? I mean, this is supposed to be the greatness of our country on display. So anyway, I mean, look, we know all about it. We know what the Smithsonian's been up to. It's an academic institution. So none of this is a surprise. This went viral. This was a infographic that the Smithsonian had put out. The aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. I'll breeze through it here. You could dive into this deeper. We also dove into it on IRL recently as well. I don't remember which day that was. But here are some traits of white culture. Take from this what you will. Maybe we'll analyze it afterwards. But here's some traits of white people, broadly speaking, in the United States: rugged individualism, family structure, emphasis on scientific method, history, Protestant work ethic, religion, status, power, and authority, future orientation, time, aesthetics, holidays, and here's some of the holidays, justice, competition, communication. Now, obviously, a lot of these are describing the subject, and then they break down the specifics of it. But some of the stuff, like right here, follow rigid time schedules. Now, this this infographic was produced during the George Floyd era, so it was kind of an attempt to tear down white people. And this infographic, I guess, was supposed to make you self-aware of your whiteness, and at the time, whiteness was a pejorative. Obviously, this has evolved a bit. People don't really feel bad for being white anymore, but at the time, it was deployed as a pejorative, and some people still do. But some of this stuff is like, I mean, you could go to some certain corners of the internet and see this exact same infographic with a different logo on it, and it would be like a pro-white culture infographic. I mean, saying so being like punctual is now white culture, I guess. I mean, there is some truth to that, I suppose. But anyway, the Smithsonian, the fact that they thought this was like a dunk on white people, that just shows you that they have an act, and still do have an axe to grind with white Americans, who obviously make up like a foundation of the country, specifically those from like England and Scotland and the Netherlands, etc. Here is this, and this is a domain you can go to. So this is the Smithsonian. This is 8 months into, this is actually 8 months into the Trump administration. 7 months. Anyway, our shared future, reckoning with our racial past, an initiative and this is the Smithsonian, right? This is our national museum. Here's from their official website, an initiative for social change. Our shared future, reckoning with our racial past, emerges from centuries of systematic racism and its urgent present-day reality. With this new initiative, we seek to spark positive social change and build a more equitable future through interdisciplinary scholarship, creative partnership, dialogue, and engagement. So these are all buzzwords that mean we really don't like white people, and we want to make some exhibits that just dunk on them all day long. And that's exactly what's going on. Reckoning with our racial past in Los Angeles. Do you think they're addressing Asians? Do you think they're asking Asians to reckon with their racial past? No, this is for white. I mean, look what's going on. Like this guy here. This is just a white struggle session. They want you to feel bad. I digress. You're probably in the know on this kind of stuff, what's going on. But there's a lot on this website that's just craziness that needs to be, and this is what Trump is talking about, for the record. So the New York Times is sitting there scratching their head like, I don't know what he's talking about. It's this. This is just like arbitrary. This is just one of many examples on the Smithsonian website of just nonsense that you can find. Of course, this whole thing is bankrolled by the Bank of America. So they act too. You see these people on the left where they act like this sort of stuff is somehow like part of the resistance. You're resisting something, like it's countercultural, like it's anti-institutional. And then every single time, it's always bankrolled by these major institutions. The Bank of America is behind this. So, I mean, just ridiculous stuff. This was Smithsonian. Also, they have this Latino exhibit. This is from Heritage Foundation. Here are some of the assertions that were made in the Latino exhibit at the NMAH. The United States stole 1/3 of Mexico in 1848. I've previously covered why that's false. Also, the territory that Mexico controlled that we won in the Mexican-American War was controlled by them for 30 years at most. So that's not a very great claim to begin with. Cubans came here seeking economic opportunity. not escaping communist barbarism. No, they're escaping communism. You can just ask a Cuban, like they'll tell you. Actually, they'll probably tell you before you even ask, because they're patriots often. They hate communism, which you should, and they know why. The Texas Revolution was a defense of slavery against an abolitionist Mexico. Yeah, well, once again, just ask a Texan and go to the Alamo. Obviously not the case. Also, Mexico was not this hotbed of progressivism in the 1800s. That's for another show. Here's some of the crap going on at the Smithsonian recently. This was established on December 27th, 2020, the National Museum of the American Latino. What are we doing? I mean, what exhibits would you even have in this? Used Nissan Altima exhibit or something? I don't know. Anyway, the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum. The history of women, that's just history. It's like half of history. They've been around. It's not like they're new around here. Women, hello, they're like in Genesis. We really need I guess this is American women's history. All right. This was created, by the way. These two museums were created, and the appropriations. I don't know if you remember, near the end of Trump's first term, they rammed through this COVID relief bill, this omnibus package. I think it was like 1.6 trillion or something. Well, it was this. They snuck these two museums across the finish line in that omnibus package that passed. And that was I think it was a Republican. So it's like, what are we doing here? Anyway, this is from Katie Pavlich. Here's some other nonsense going on at the Smithsonian. This is from Katie Pavlich. This is how the Smithsonian marks the 50th anniversary of Title IX and defines the legislation. Not a single use of the word woman. Outrageous rewrite and manipulation of history then and now. So we'll read here. The exhibition marks the 50th anniversary of Title IX, federal legislation championed by Congresswoman Patsy Mink and signed into law by President Richard Nixon in 1972. Love Nixon. We're not perfect. You make mistakes. It happens. The act unintentionally boosted long-standing efforts to open male-dominated arenas of sports. Male-dominated arenas of sports, also known as sports. Anyway, even as Title IX protections have been expanded over the years, most recently under the Biden administration, athletes continue to face sexism, racism, transphobia, and other forms of bigotry. The stories of athletes before and after Title IX are part of a larger narrative of the struggle for equality in the United States. And almost on cue, there's a Spanish translation below it. Oh, anyway. So as Katie pointed out, woman is not mentioned in this. So even if you're pro Title IX, which there's a lot of problems with it, they don't even mention woman. Like the whole point. That was the whole gist of the situation. So, and then apparently the pressing issues of our time are transphobia, racism, bigotry, sexism. Young people can't even really buy a house or start families. The birth rate is in the dumpster. We might go extinct because we can't procreate. And the issues facing our time, obviously, are sexism and racism and transphobia. Anyway, Captive Dreamer here, he broke it down perfectly. The problem with institutions like the Smithsonian is probably not too dissimilar with what has happened to the classics departments across the country, controlled, curated, and run by people who harbor a deep-seated resentment towards not only our history, but the West more broadly. That is exactly right. That is the problem. The rot goes so much deeper than the Smithsonian. It's obviously, buried in our universities. It's just people that have a chip on their shoulder. It's people that, like he said, are just resentful against the West. Presumably because they haven't really done much in their lives. They're kind of losers when you meet these people. They don't really have much going on, and they hate their fathers. And typically when you have that sort of grudge, you're going to, like I said, have a chip on your shoulder. And they often take it out on the West. They view the West as a stand-in for their father. And they view patriots as stand-ins for successful people that they want to rage against and blame for everything. And like he said, it's across the West more broadly. I mean, if you think the Smithsonian situation is bad, the most toxic museum situation is the British Museum. I was looking for an article because people love to dunk on the British Museum. How many artifacts in the British Museum are actually British from the Euronews? When I looked up British Museum criticism, there's like an article every day of like leftists like crashing out over the British Museum, because if you know anything about British history, they had a large empire, and when you have a large empire, you do a lot of exploring of your empire, and when you do that, you're going to find a lot of cool stuff, and you want to bring that cool stuff back to Britain and show it off. And people are upset about this basic fact of history. Like as you see here, I mean, they're just complaining. I don't even want to bother reading this because it's just like whining. Well, the British took these artifacts because they weren't really treasured by the original holder. I don't even want to call them holders. Wherever they found these artifacts, they found them. They rediscovered them, because I would just say they discovered them because they weren't really being utilized or admired or even acknowledged. The most infamous. Oh, sorry. Oh, I was reading the article, the Wikipedia article, so I was down a bit. The most infamous example is the Rosetta Stone. I mean, obviously, the Rosetta Stone was a huge deal. It was how we were able to start deciphering Egyptian scripts and that sort of thing. But let me find rediscovery here. So when Napoleon invaded Egypt, he had a squad of French with him, and they spotted the slab with inscriptions on one side that the soldiers had uncovered while demolishing a wall within the fort. Obviously, they're being a bit vague here. To read in between the lines, the Rosetta Stone was being used as a part of a wall in Egypt. So, I mean, that kind of explains the situation surrounding these artifacts when they were discovered and brought to Europe. There's so many more examples. This is just a famous one with the Rosetta Stone. You see here the English, took it off the French's hands a little later. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, hilarious. Like I said, that was just one example. There's plenty of examples of these artifacts not really being utilized by the locals or admired in any way. There was also Lionsgate, I think, was being scattered and used like for flooring. Anyway, another big story here from the Wall Street Journal: Trump administration to screen immigrants for anti-American views. The new guidance builds on the agency's policy of vetting social media for evidence of anti-Semitism. This is, again, just kind of building off of the Smithsonian thing, is just reshifting the priorities of the government towards pro-America policy and pro-America ideology. This is a great example of it. A few months ago, let's see. I'll just read here. The Trump administration plans to scrutinize social media for, quote, anti-American ideologies when deciding to grant visa or green card applications. No brainer. ICE, the primary agency in charge of legal immigration, said Tuesday that its officers should give significant weight to evidence that an immigrant has, quote, any involvement in anti-American or terrorist organization when reviewing residency, work, and visa applications. Again, this is a no-brainer. A DHS spokesperson said, if you hate America, don't try and live in America. It is that simple. So true. It really is that simple. Let's see here. This is the good part. Well, yeah, this is what I wanted to talk about right here. The latest directive builds on the agency's April announcement that it would screen immigrants' social media for evidence of anti-Semitism. As part of that shift, many immigrants, including those applying for tourist or student visas to the U.S., must now submit their social media handles and make their public profiles public for officers to review. It's a no-brainer. I mean, like when you look, unfortunately, your Twitter typically is good insight into your mind because people tend to just fire off what they're thinking, which is, again, probably not a great thing, but it makes it very useful because if people can't even, contain themselves on Twitter and contain their anti-American views on Twitter, then who knows what they're harboring deep in their hearts and the resentfulness they have against Americans. And that kind of is the problem, as you're seeing with the Elon Omars of the world, is you have a large chunk of the country that despises Americans, that despises heritage Americans specifically. They put out these types of Smithsonian, pamphlets here as an attempt to dunk on heritage Americans or white Americans, whatever you want to call them. Also, I remember people freaking out in April about this on Twitter. They were like, oh, we're screening for anti-Semitism, but we're not screening for anti-American rhetoric, which I actually kind of said the same thing. I was like, okay, that's true. We don't want people coming here that are, filled with hate. That's obviously, if you hate Jewish people, you wouldn't like the United States very much because we have a lot of Jewish people. So, it wouldn't be a great fit if you just have that going for you. But it is, at the time I was thinking, yeah, but what about people that hate the majority of the country, right? People that hate Americans, and specifically people that hate white Americans, because that really is kind of the big pressing form of hatred in the United States right now, and it has been over the last few years, for a few decades, really. So it's a relief. It's a relief to see the Trump administration screen immigrants for anti-American behaviors. They could just whip this out. They could utilize the Smithsonian's little piece here, and they could just rattle these off and say, what do you think about individualism? What do you think about, family structure? What do you think about the Protestant work ethic? That would actually get a lot of people on Twitter in trouble too, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, no, like you should like Christianity, right? I mean, that just seems like a good start. I've always said the test to enter the United States to see if you'll be compatible with America is if you can eat a bacon cheeseburger. I think that would be the optimal way to do things. So with that, thank you for watching this portion of the morning live show. We will be back tonight for Timcast IRL at 8 p.m. Be there, come hang out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.